Hit record.
So, can you hear me? Okay.
Can you hear me first?
So we've asked these gentlemen to come up. As I was beginning to say, when we've done these previously, what I've heard as far as feedback is the most helpful portion of the workshop is hearing from people who have gotten the award. What worked, what didn't work. And so we have dedicated about an hour to this. If we don't use all that time, that's fine, but I don't want to cut you off from any questions you might have. I'm going to hand this, basically we're going to be handing this over to each other, okay? So as I ask you questions, you can just hand it to the next person. Does that make sense? Yes. What you say can and will be held against you. So I'm going to let you start. Let me get my questions. They're right over here. And I'm going to let you introduce yourselves. Okay. So I'm going to hand this to you. You're going to have to hold on to that. So, first of all, I'd like you to... Oh, now you need this one.
Question.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. So, gentlemen, I would like you to introduce yourself and provide some history, who you are, what department you're from, what area you applied to within NSF, and how many tries did it take before you were awarded your career award. Okay? Let's start with you.
Okay, so I'm Zhuang from Computer Science Department. I've been working in the system security area. So I submitted my proposal to NSF SATC program. So basically, it's a cross-cutting program focusing on the security. So I got my career in my first try.
I'm Billy Oates, mechanical engineering. Submitted 3 times. I do work in mechanics of materials. So there's a program within engineering, CMMI, and I forget what that stands for. But within that, there's something called mechanics of materials. So it was a no-brainer for me. There's a few others, such as in DMR, Division of Materials Research, but I can give details later on why I decided that, but I think that was all, right?
I think that's it. Yeah, for now.
So, I'm Ken Knappenberger.
A little louder for these folks.
My name's Ken Knappenberger. I'm in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. My NSF career award was awarded through macromolecular and nanoscience MSN program, which is within chemistry. My research is in the area of optics, laser optics, and photonic nanomaterials, and I got the award on my second attempt.
All right, I'm Jonathan Clark. I'm mechanical engineering. I do robotics. I went through CMMI, which I don't remember what it stands for either, really. It's civil and mechanical and manufacturing or something. Anyways, within there, I went with the dynamic systems area. And I'll talk a little bit more about that too later, I guess. It depends how you count it, but in one way of counting, I did on my 4th try. So we only get 3 tries, but so I got on my 3rd try. But we'll talk more about that later too. I'm not very fast about this.
Okay, since you have the mic, I'm going to let you start the next question.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you just 5 simple questions, and then I want to open it up so that folks here can ask you questions. So these are just some broad questions, and then I think most of the questions are going to come from these folks here. Sure. The second question is, how did you determine what area within NSF you would apply to?
All right. So My area is in robotics, but there's no robotics division. They now have a call. They have a National Robotics Initiative, and so they do robotics calls. But so people in my area could go in a couple different directions. The two big ones were either controls or dynamics. And I could have probably done either, but the actual proposal that I was writing fit much better in the dynamic systems area, so I went with that. But the second time I wrote my proposal, I made what was perhaps a mistake, is that I was combining the dynamics and robotics with some sort of smart material stuff. And that was out of the purview of the people in the dynamic systems track. So they had a lot of questions about it, and I had a hard time communicating really what I was trying to do with that as part of my proposal. So when I rewrote it the third time, I essentially cut that out and concentrated on the stuff that was dynamic systems, and that time it got through. So I guess my moral of the story is be aware of who your audience is, just like any talk. Know what their focus is, especially if you're spread between two areas. When you write proposal, if you choose an area, make sure you structure your proposal to that audience. Otherwise you get weird questions or misunderstandings.
Okay, so as to how to decide where to submit it, technically I guess I didn't, NSF decided. So when I submitted my proposal the first time, I selected an area that I think no longer exists. It was called like molecular chemical dynamics. They've replaced it with something else. But basically in my research, what we're interested in trying to understand is sort of how electronic dynamics influence the optical properties of these nanomaterials. And so the type of research that I was doing, I felt had been funded primarily through this one program, Molecular Chemical Dynamics. So like I said, I designated that as the area of choice when I submitted my proposal, but after submitting it, NSF rerouted it because I guess it had the word nano in it to this other program, this nano program, which I've looked at the people who were getting funding through there, and they were all primarily synthesis and structural characterization people. So I thought that I had no chance, and I was a little bit irritated. And then I got the scores back, and they were primarily excellent and very good, but then I didn't get funded. And so I thought that NSF really didn't know what they were doing, especially because one of the reviewers wrote, I have no expertise in this area, but I give it a very good. so anyway, I called the program manager and I talked to them, about whether or not, is this really the right program, or maybe is it another one would be a better choice? And they assured me that at NSF they know what they're doing and that I should just go with it. So then when I submitted it the second time, I went with it, and then it got funded. So then I decided that at NSF they really know what they were doing, and they're very brilliant people. So I guess in the end, they'll decide. But and I guess a lot of times those decisions are made maybe by if a program manager sees something that they think might fit, and there's an opportunity to try to fund it. I mean, I think that usually when they move proposals, they probably move proposals in a way that they think is going to benefit or increase your chances, not to sort of preemptively triage you. But it is also worth looking, if there are people in your field who are getting funded through NSF. Usually, hopefully, if they're funded through NSF, they have this acknowledgement at the end of their paper that gives their grant number, and then you can go to the NSF website, right, and look that up and find out, what program and what program manager that grant corresponds to, and you can begin to at least try to get in the right neighborhood that way, and then understand that you may not have complete control over where you park, but you can at least get close.
Right. So to follow up what Ken mentioned, so I assume many of you have gone through Fastlane, or at least logged on. Actually, you don't even have to go into Fastlane. If you just go to NSF's website and do a search, right here. So if you go and do a search in certain areas, all these proposals will come up on what's been funded by who, and you can read the abstract. Keep in mind that this abstract, it's not the one that is in their summary page. When you get awarded, the program manager will ask you, write something that either a seventh grader or a politician can understand, and that's what goes on NSF's website. So it'll at least kind of give you a flavor on what's funded. So that's one thing. The other thing is, of course, contact the program manager, maybe send them an email, usually first before calling. People seem to freak out now if you do a cold call. Program managers vary in personality, so you'll just have to work with them and send them like the short summary page. Also find an excuse to go to DC. You never want to tell a program manager, hey, I'd like to come and visit you in DC, but if you say, hey, I'm going to be in DC for such and such, could I just drop by and chat with you? If you do get that opportunity, don't go in and give them a 30-minute spiel on what you're doing. Ask questions, get them to tell you more about what they're after than you just dumping a bunch of information on them. You usually get a lot more insight in what may work and what may not work for their program.
Okay, to me, I think it's really quite simple because most of the security proposals they go to the SATC program, Secure and Trustworthy Computing. So normally, if you found that there are several choices for you to submit a proposal to, pick the one fit your proposal best. So sometimes program manager, they are going to like send your proposal to two different panels. So normally you will get a extremely better review from at least one panel. So try to find the best panel for your proposal. You can ask your advisor. Usually that's a good idea because when we talk about your research, right, there will be a continuity of your research. You can also send an email to the program manager. They normally will be happy to answer this kind of questions.
Okay.
Could I add?
Yeah.
There was a couple other things I forgot about. Hopefully I'm not going to forget again. So one is I had a colleague here at FSU that he submitted last year. He didn't get it, but he contacted the program manager. And what happened in the panel review was about half or so many people in the panel loved this idea. They thought it was going to be the next greatest thing ever. The other half thought it was the worst idea ever. So he didn't fund it, but when he contacted him, he said, yeah, I really like this idea. Are you familiar with the EAGER program? Or have any of you heard of the EAGER program? Okay, so if you're not, I think it's a one-year program, but it's not reviewed. It's funded at the discretion of the program manager. So this person is going to go through that. And he talked about, well, is this going to jeopardize my opportunity to get the career? But it's such a short program. It's 1 year. Usually you can justify this and at least get you enough results that can at least sway that other half of the panel down the road. And there was a second thing I was going to mention, but it's not coming to me. So it must not have been important.
So to follow up on what Billy said.
So can I add one thing?
Yes, you can.
So I think there is also a program called CRI. So this is for the assistant professor in their first 2 years. So some people call it like a pre-career award. So if you are still in your first 2 years, you definitely should try.
Oh, I just remembered. It was important. So when he was talking about the panel, try to find a good panel. Well, of course, you don't get to select the panel for your particular one, but I will say that if I assume a lot of you review papers for other people and how difficult it is to find time to do these things. The same thing is for reviewing a NSF panel. It's a big time commitment. So it's often hard to find reviewers. So I usually at least put down 2 or 3 preferred reviewers on mine. I don't know if they ever get selected, but I know that program managers do have a hard time finding reviewers, so it can't hurt.
And just to follow up on what you were saying about EAGER, we actually had a discussion with NSF Days yesterday where we talked about EAGERs.
And I had put forward the question because I knew of your colleague. Does it lessen your chance or make it a better chance that you could get career in the future? And basically, well, first they said it doesn't negate it. I mean, you can apply for career, but it is giving you a little more, so when he goes back next round, he'll maybe be able to sway those other folks. So that could be the difference that gets him his career this time around.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to mention that. Okay, so here's,
Can I
yeah,
follow up just on the
yes.
suggested reviewers idea? Do you have, how do you choose suggested reviewers? Do you have a specific criteria?
Would people that know my work and appreciate it. And the other thing is, if you're just starting and trying to learn folks that may be on a panel like that, find out whoever's the expert in your field and then go make friends with them, meet them at conferences, get invited to their university to give a talk, because you do have 15 pages, and that's a lot to expose what you don't know, but often we don't communicate the best, at least as engineers and sometimes scientists. So talking to these people in person to kind of get feedback can, even if they're not on the panel, you can often get questions and get some good feedback on how to address these things in the review.
I want to make a comment about the peer review process because sometimes you don't, even if you suggest names, it's difficult to get people to respond. And it may, that there might be viewed as a conflict or whatever. NSFI policy can make a judgment decision on a proposal when there are three reviews only. And so there are two reviews that come through the panel, the primary and the secondary. And so all they need to do is they need to get one ad hoc reviewer. Sometimes at the panel meetings, they only have two reviews, the primary and the secondary, and then they ask somebody on the panel to review that proposal then and there. So there is a stochastic element to the process, which really means that you have to really carefully look at how you craft the proposal, because you might be going to an audience that is very general, not a specific expert in your particular area.
Okay.
Regarding the suggested reviewers, and as Russ just mentioned, I was also thinking about the conflict of interest. You might already know someone in the field as an expert, and you might have some previous collaboration. Are we allowed to recommend those, people that we collaborated with? No. Yes,
So-
exactly.
So the question was, can you use prior collaborators as potential reviewers? Or is that a conflict of interest?
Well, there's a time limit, right?
Yeah, I think it's like 5 years or something. So I didn't mean to insinuate I asked people that I collaborate with, but just people that I know in the same field that have similar interests and similar appreciation for certain research areas.
Okay. Okay, so the next question is, I think most people that write aren't doing it without any assistance. And I'm wondering what kind of resources at FSU you may have used as you were writing. Did you have people review your proposal? Did you have people assist on your budget? What kind of assistance did you look for as you were putting together your proposal?
Okay. Well, I'm not sure how I ended up holding this thing at the beginning, as I sit in the middle. But anyway, well, one was this workshop, right? Is one thing. I participated in this. I think a really important resource is to vet your proposal with your colleagues, because I think the number one thing that has to happen with your proposal is that people have to understand it, right? So it's unlikely that people who review your proposal, whether it be ad hoc or as part of the panel, will have immediate expertise in what you're proposing. Certainly not more than like one person will. So you have to be able to really articulate very clearly what is the idea that what is your project, right? So if you give your proposal to a few of your colleagues and they hand it back to you and tell you that they're not getting it, then that's not because they can't understand it, it's because you didn't say it, right? So I think an important thing to do is to make sure you've written a clear proposal. In one way that you can screen that is by relying on your colleagues to tell you whether or not that comes across, right? So vetting with your colleagues, I think, is maybe the most important thing. I can also say that when I prepared my budget, I made a lot of mistakes. So yes, at the departmental level, and I guess also at sponsored research level, my proposal budget was reviewed, and so in terms of preparing the budget, that was a resource that we relied on. And I would also recommend, if you know someone who's won an NSF Career Award, maybe you should ask to see their proposal. I'm sure they'd be willing to let you see it, and you could get an idea for how to structure it and what are the different elements. I mean, I think these are the important things.
In our office, on our website, we have examples of successful career proposals. I think we may have all of yours. Not sure, but I will check. I'm pretty sure we do. So that resource is available to any of the FSU faculty.
All right, so I would guess the thing I would say is, echo with Ross, is you don't know who's going to read your proposal. And so after having been through a couple panels and after written this, I think my rule of thumb right now is to assume that if you're going to have like 3 or 4 people read your proposal, one of those people will be an expert in your area, but the rest of them won't. So you need to have enough rigor and technical sort of depth that that one person who really knows your area knows that you know what you're talking about and you're not just making stuff up. But the other 3 people are going to skim past all the equations that you put in there. Right? They're like, oh, equations, okay, good. I'm not going to spend, because you have, every panel is different, but when I've reviewed panels, they've given me something like 8 or 9 proposals I have to read and review on, and I have a week to do it, as well as everything else I'm doing. So each proposal gets a couple of hours of my time, but no more. So I'm going to read through it quickly. And so I'm going to skip over really dense stuff. The temptation is to put really all the great details, equations, whatever it is in there. You should have them in there because there's going to be one person who's going to check for it. But everybody else is just going to gloss over that. Or at least you need to be prepared that they might gloss over them. And they're looking for the big picture. You really know what you're talking about. Is this a compelling idea, blah, blah, blah. And so how do you know that you hit those targets? And so I would say the most valuable thing that I got was to have someone review my proposal. Now, the temptation is to have someone that I'm really close to, that's the expert in my domain. But I think it's also important to get somebody who's in your area but not in your specific focus to read through it as well. So I would, if possible, get those 2 types of reviewers to read through it. One person to, read through it very, very detailed as a master. Another say, hey, I do robotics, but I do a different kind of robotics, but I'll read your proposal. And does it make sense to me and is it compelling to me?
Okay, thanks. You can pass it on. And gentlemen, our recorder is telling us the closer you keep it to your mouth, the better she can hear you.
I don't know if I have a lot more to add. I will say maybe I was an outlier, but on my 3rd try, I let someone else review mine again, and they said it was like reading the phone book. And I was at the point where I was done with it, so I just submitted it. So I guess my advice is it's good to get advice, but the buck stops with you. You got to figure out, is it good enough, or is it really something you want to do, and is that coming out? So that's all I have.
So I don't have much to add. So the first thing, I think if possible, you should try to read some proposal from your own area. So you can see how they're going to structure the proposal, how they're going to present their ideas. So idea is the single most thing in our proposal, right? And you can get some, general proposal from other field to see how they're going to structure their proposal. But it's better if you can get someone close to your area. And also, they talk a lot about to have two types of expertise to review your proposal. I think this is very important. You should try to avoid to make your proposal too simple to read, okay? Because this will give them an impression of your work is really trivial. So this is very deadly in your proposal. So try to make your proposal has some depth and also be somewhat easy to understand for some people, okay?
Okay, so finding that balance between.
Yeah, that's very important, I guess.
Yes.
So last year I reviewed a proposal. Apparently, she has a number of ideas, but I found that the first one to be really to feel it to be very trivial. So the proposal ended up being rejected very early. I think it's very important to
Okay.
keep your depths. Yeah.
So tell us what is something that surprised you about this process that you didn't expect? Were there any surprises along the way?
Okay. So I guess start with me. So I think there are lots of surprises, but the biggest surprise is that even if you get a highly competitive rating, it doesn't necessarily mean your proposal will be funded. Okay. If you get a competitive rating, your proposal might be funded. So it really depends on the program. So the program manager can decide which proposal will be funded. So using security as example, we have I believe we have about 22 proposals. Usually they will only fund top 3 or 4 proposal in a panel. So if you get a highly competitive, likely your proposal will be funded, but that might not be the case. So if you didn't get it funded, so contact the program manager and ask them to give you a explanation. And sometimes if you keep submitting next year, they feel guilty because they didn't give you a proposal, even you are rated highly competitive. Next time they will probably give it to you. Okay.
So I guess the more of these proposals you send out and get rejected, since it's usually 10% or so, you get a lot of reviews back, and don't worry, you'll get desensitized to all the comments you get in some of these things. So I first started seeing this in my panel reviews on the NSF. I think the first one was I hadn't published anything in this area, so I knew absolutely nothing about this. Although you want to do something new that's distinct. So the next time I published some stuff in the area, and then the second panel come back, I had just gotten a DARPA Young Faculty Award. So actually in the review it said this is an excellent proposal, but he already has a career award. He doesn't need another one. And then I finally got it on the third one, and I'm trying to remember now. The program manager called me and he asked me these questions on, well, why is this distinct from your other career award? So we had this discussion on the phone that I had to justify getting the career. So you do get a lot of strange things that it's really stochastic on these panels. So like everyone said here, you have to find the Goldilocks and how to write these 15 pages. I think the best advice I found was write it roughly at the level of a Scientific American article to get people really excited about something, but it's simple enough that a broad community can see, but the experts can also appreciate.
Okay. Well, I guess for me the biggest surprise was that I got one. I don't really know beyond that. I guess I would say one surprise is just sort of how variable the whole thing feels, right? So, I had also a DOD early career award and went through the same things that Billy just described. But with those kind of funding agencies, when you talk to people who have funding through those like DOD, DOE agencies, things seem much more consistent, I guess, in terms of the approach with NSF. It seems like everyone that you talk to will give you slightly different advice. And so I guess in the end, I mean, what I think is that you have to just propose something that's compelling, and you have to, like I said before, state it very clearly. So with some of the funding agencies, right, you know, like with the DoD, for example, there might be some clear observables that you can say that you're going to be able to deliver, and the program manager will help you figure out what those should be. Here, I think when you write the NSF, specifically the career, I think one of the things that you have to remember is that one of the deliverables is your scholarship, right? So basically, you're proposing a plan that's going to help you propel yourself in your career to locally at, in this case, FSU, provide the infrastructure, whether it be in the lab, the intellectual expertise, whatever it is, so that 5 years from now, people will say that person is an expert in this area of research, and because of that is now going to have, and also education, of course, and because of that is now going to have a successful academic career, right? So that's one of the things that you also have to be doing. You have to be showing basically how through this project you're really establishing yourself somehow, right? As opposed to just delivering something. One of the things that you're delivering is you, right? 5 years from now, what you'll be an expert at doing. And making like a really sort of common thread between your research and your education, right? In terms of doing that, you have to tie the two together. But I guess that's all I have to say on surprises, I guess.
I think I'll mention too, one that's already been brought up here, is if you're resubmitting your proposal, I would say take the advice you got from individual reviewers with a large grain of salt. If you got the same advice from multiple reviewers, that's probably worth holding on to. Because I've watched proposals where they came back and said, you need to do this, this, and this to make it a better proposal. And then I've rewritten that proposal with X, Y, and Z, and they've written it, and they're like, this is terrible, this X, Y, and Z stuff just, it makes no sense. Get rid of that, and it's a really good proposal. And so we overcorrect it, and don't do that. There's a real tendency on your second time to try to, because usually, a totally different group of people are reviewing this thing. So whatever particular bias that one person had, you'll get a different set of biases the second time. That's one. The second thing that surprised me was that they're really serious about the compliance to the guidelines. I got burned by that. So I submitted my first or my second proposal, and I let something slip. I had a previous NSF proposal, and I didn't have the name and proposal number in my career proposal, and they got returned without review.
A comment I would add to that is that we actually have a colleague in our department who had his proposal returned because of the reference formatting. So like when you say that there's a detail that you have to pay attention to, you really have to pay attention to it.
Yeah, it's kind of a pain, but apparently they're pretty strict about it. So take those guidelines pretty seriously.
So when you said you had 4, one was returned
that was
without
over.
review?
Right. That was
because
my-
that's not counted against you
so
as...
I went through it through 4 years.
Yes.
So that didn't count as one of my 3.
Yes.
So you
Yeah.
might want to, don't just plan on submitting your last 3 years that you're eligible, just in
Yeah.
case the unthinkable happens.
Catherine?
No, that's fine, yeah, I mean, you're right, you know, I mean, I think there's no place like others, and, you guys are setting up for us. So, I mean, I don't give any feedback on the scientific content, but, I mean, on the phone, you know, we have to, and like you said, you know, we've seen that before, like, for what we send out to you, I mean, and it's, you know, it's not good for us, it's not good for you guys. They are very, very picky, and, you know, if we, I don't know, I just get us to be like 2 pages, they have to follow the guidelines.
So what Catherine's saying, for the people listening on my microphone, is that, you know, sponsored research is there to help you, you know, and their goal is to help you stick with those guidelines as well. Yes. Yes, they certainly don't want them to be returned without review, and that's just another point of why you should try to get things to sponsored research as early as you can, so that they have plenty of time to go through. You know, the shorter amount of time you give them, the, you know, you can have the more lengthy review, or you can have the, you know, we can do what we can, but you've cut a short review. Yes?
Just a practical question. Is there a specific amount of time that you would like to have it in advance?
Well, sponsored research has a 3-day review policy, 3
days.
business days.
Is that like the, you know, at least, what do you prefer?
Well, you know, it's sooner the better. Deadlines, sometime like 2 weeks ago, we had about 40 proposals in test in different, you know, departments. I mean, we were about 10 scientific analysis, but then the proposal. So, we have to review the budget, we have to review the plan. And I said it's pretty fast to me, because, you know, you don't know right away whether it's an issue or not, but,
So this year, we could have as many as 40 people going for a career. I mean, that would be a record number. It'd be phenomenal. If that happens, that's a lot hitting sponsored research at one time. So we're going to go through what we're handing out before we go. But one thing in here is the deadline, and we've proposed an earlier deadline, that if you can set that date in your head instead of that 3 days, I think it would help sponsored research. I've talked to Pam Ray, the director there, and you know, the goal is if we can get these in, you know, if you can make that an earlier date your final, not have the 3-day, but the one that we're going to talk about and hear in your head, I think it will help everything to go much more smoothly. So we'll go through that when we go through this packet. So I want to see if there's other questions. Yes.
Just now we talked about that 2 pages CV. I'm not sure if this kind of people should be listed on the collaborators. Sometimes you really do not never collaborated with them, but their name are on your different co-author list because they collaborated with former advisors. If you have never seen them before, you don't even know them. So should those people be listed as your collaborators?
Are you co-authors on the paper?
Yes.
Then I can list them.
But you don't really know how they
I don't think it matters.
So the question was, if you've co-authored with somebody else, you need to list them as collaborate?
Yeah, no matter what.
Yes, no matter what. Okay?
What, just hypothetical, what if there are so many people that are co-authors on a paper that it fills up 2 pages?
We'll ask sponsored research that question. What is that?
Just separate.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So that's separate, so that won't affect you. Yeah.
the collaborators on the file, they have new guidelines since January 26th, so anything submitted after that date, do the separate document and then section where you can list from the collaborators. So from now on, you don't have to put it on the fire station. Oh, so from now on, there is additional supplementary material that we need to prepare with the collaborators. It's the new section, you'll see this, the your document first name, you'll be able to, aside from
And just to follow up on that, the GPG was updated in January. So if you applied, you're okay. If you applied last year, don't assume that what you have is going to work for you this year. There are changes, and in the PAPG and the GPG, it'll tell you right up front what the changes are this year. And if you have any questions, you can contact our office or contact your sponsored research person, or your departmental person should know that as well. But don't assume that what guidelines were in place last year are still this year. Okay? Yes?
A follow-up question. If the co-authors are PhD students or postdocs of other professors, not your own, not your PhD student or postdoc, do you list them as collaborators?
The question is if
I
you
think-
have, do you want to take
Or
that, Billy?
maybe they can comment better, but I think if anything's in the GPG that says must, you have to do. There's other places where they don't say that word, and I think it's up to your discretion. Because Rick will send me some things, and I'll decide I'm going to let it go. So it's all up to you. But I think if it says must, you have to do it.
So the question was if there was students that were students of somebody, a co-PI, but not yours. And so that would be a GPG question, but as Billy said, if it's not a must, then it's up to your discretion. And what area are you in? Okay, engineering. So Rick is right behind you, and he'll work with you as we're putting this together. What other questions would you have for the?
How long will we wait until we see the proposals returned without into any format? Till like 6 months after, or 3?
So we're repeat the question before you answer it, if you would, please.
Yeah. How long does it take to hear back when you get returned without review? And the answer is it's sooner, right? Generally speaking, on the proposals I hear back from, the earlier I hear back, the worse the news. So,
Yes.
well,
No.
for other ones, there's other opportunities, yeah.
Yes.
But for career, you have to wait a year. So,
And with career, so you're applying in July. You usually aren't hearing until January, February of the next year. There's quite a delay, and it does seem the longer you no news is good news. Let's just put it that way.
Later this year because we were on a continuing resolution, and the Congress got around to actually passing a budget, believe it or not, this fiscal year. So it's a little bit late.
Yeah.
The turnaround time is, you're right, you hear from the declinations first, the program officers like to clear the decks first, and then they will start their awards, and then if you don't hear anything, you haven't gotten a decline, you haven't gotten a email message saying I'm going to recommend funding, you're in the gray zone, which is actually pretty good because they're looking for additional dollars to fund.
Yes.
And that can take a long time. And they have to clear their budgets by the 1st of September. So there's oftentimes a real flurry of activity in July and August. And they have a lot of awards coming out. They have to clear their budgets.
Yep. So again, as Ross was saying, they usually do their awards and their declinations in that gray area. You know, there's still hope. There's still hope that they can find the funds to fund you. So if you don't hear anything, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So other questions of our, yes?
Hi, I've just heard lots of great educational project ideas, and I keep hearing that they get more and more innovative. If you don't mind just briefly sharing, or at least I don't know, you don't have to share the specifics of your own projects, that'd be great.
yeah, okay. So I do robotics, and so our educational outreach was involved building some, working with community members. This is one thing I would recommend is this, there are 2 different community groups, and I got both of them to write letters of support. And when I've been reviewing proposals, it looks good when you have got those letters of support. It's one thing to say, I'm going to work with this group, but if there's no letter of support, they're like, yeah, sure, good, yeah, right, whatever. But if you see, I've seen ones with like 7 letters of support, and I'm like, this guy has gone and done his homework. And usually it leaves a favorable impression. So we were building some, we're doing some outreach with them, and we're building some robots and distributing them and transferring information and training. So that's what we did.
Okay. So for me, I try to do something that I could relate to my research. So we do like optical imaging with lasers. So I worked through the NSF RET, right, the Research Experience for Teachers program, with teachers that help develop a sort of image-based curriculum, where they did a couple of experiments where we basically provided them with some images to test some physical process that they could then take and have the students in their classroom analyze. But I think that one of the advantages of that was that we did it through this NSF RET, right? So it was something that we knew the NSF already liked, which is run through the Magnet Lab, actually. And they're usually looking for mentors, so you might be able to participate in that. But yes, also get the letter from anyone that you work with. I've seen that discussed on panels and mentioned in reviews as well.
And these type of letters are not meant to be letters of endorsement. So be sure they're not just saying we're great, but they're saying specifically that they're going to be partnering. Yes.
So now the format is like one page with one sentence, not full letters, right? I think that's good. It's considered letters of collaboration.
Yes. Actually, I think in the solicitation, it tells you exactly what it needs to say. Yes. Yeah, you won't have the problem of them saying the wrong thing.
So I also did this thing with the Mag Lab. I mentioned I'd work with REU or RAT, mainly because these outreach things can consume you, and people on the panel realize that, and they don't want you spending exorbitant amount of time. It's an important concept or component, but you don't want to put a big boilerplate of things. In addition to that, I did my own component just to try to make it unique. So the College of Engineering has a program with the Challenger Learning Center. So I said I would work with them. I also worked with Mary Brogan Museum at the time. They're not here anymore. But I mainly said that I would spend time doing work on smart materials with K through 12. So I tried to span the K through 12 up to undergrads, just to expose them to that area. And I've put that in a few proposals, and I've never got a bad comment on doing something at a museum. That usually goes over well.
Question regarding the REU. I talked to the program officer at different times, and I saw that I was encouraged to include this component into the proposal. And so I did that, and the feedback was I need to elaborate more. Okay, so in this sense, I put for my educational component the integration of research and education about 2 pages, and it was insufficient. So, and then I'd like to know, like, when you put in the REU component, and how much in terms of pages, the size, how much information you have to put in there, and to if I have to increase the size, that means I have to sacrifice my research description. So, what is your judgment on this?
There may be a misconception here. REU is a specific program within NSF called Research Enhancement for Undergraduates. If you have an NSF grant, you can get a supplement, an REU supplement. Okay. There are also freestanding REU programs where you can ask for a whole bunch of money to support undergraduates. What you're really talking about is the undergraduate training component. But you shouldn't use the acronym REU in your proposal because it's going to confuse the program officer. I would think. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would think that would be the program officer. So I suppose like about 1 year, just
No, we're still crossing words. The REU is a specific program in NSF that supports undergraduate supplements for an existing grant, or it's a separate freestanding program like HPMI has, like AME has, for a pool of funds to support undergraduates during the summer. So you shouldn't use the acronym REU in your proposal because it's going to be confusing.
So I should change the
So,
the name.
so here's my maybe naive understanding of this. So I will put REU, and I'll say there's existing REU programs at FSU. I don't have to go recruit these students. I don't have to manage them, find places, dorms for them to live. All the infrastructure is already here. All I have to do is provide them with mentorship and a problem. And so I put it that way so then I can say I can work on my research and expose them to my research using the infrastructure. But I would never, you don't want to propose that you're going to create some REU yourself or go after that program as part of your career. But just saying that you're going to leverage programs at FSU, I think, is very useful.
Yeah, I think we have at least 3 freestanding REU programs in the Southwest campus. There's one in Magnet Lab, there's one across the street, and I think there's
So a comment that I would make on that is that I did, I think, more or less what Billy's talking about. Mine was the RET, though, which is for teachers, not undergraduates. I think that the Magnet Lab even has a part of their outreach webpage that highlights things about this RET program, and I assume for the REU. So in the proposal, I clearly say that I'm collaborating basically in that mechanism, but also in your citation, right? In your references, you can actually cite that website, right? Which I think is also a good idea because it shows that you're talking about something that's really there and has the infrastructure and it's working, and if the reviewers want, they can go pull up that website and see that it's a real thing. It makes it a little more concrete. Yeah.
Not in the proposal.
No, in your works cited, you can cite. Maybe it changed since I did it.
It changed this year.
Oh, okay. Hmm. Okay. Okay. Well, then I guess you can't. But that was what I did anyway. So that's one comment. The other comment, though, is that your educational part has to be reflected by your budget, right? So you have to have some activities there that I think you're budgeting for in the career award. So, and one of the mistakes that I think people also make with the educational part, where you really see people get dinged for this, is that in the research, it's easy to know whether or not you've been successful, right? Like you'll know how your research was successful, but you also have to have some plan for a metric in the education part. Whatever that's going to be, you have to decide what's the best thing, but you have to document in there that you've thought through how you're going to know whether or not this effort that you're putting forth in education is successful or not, right?
Could you expound, or maybe all of you, on how you do that, how you quantify your educational impact?
So the question is, how did you quantify the educational impact in your proposal?
I have to go read my proposal. I think with the RET, the Magnet Lab does it for you. I had some evaluation system that I tried to tie to the FSU evaluation, but the exact details, getting near the end of my career award, so I can send you any details, though, if you want to follow up with an email. I'd be happy to email anything to you.
So I want to say something about education. So education, it's actually a very important part in the career proposal, okay? So I don't have, they provide some very good examples. So my proposal is actually a bad example for the education part. So it's a little bit flawed in case of education. They would like you to have an education plan to go beyond your teaching, go beyond your research. They would like you to outreach. They would like to have a broader kind of activity, okay? So I was able to get away from that because before submitting the proposal, I already developed some educational operating system before. So they think that's a significant part of the activity. So I was able to get away from that. But when you write your education part, try to make it like more concrete. So say, for example, if you say I'm going to like recruit like underrepresented minorities, so show some like examples. If you have already working with female student or black student, that would be very good. And also, so this is a little bit after the after you get the grant. So when you report it, you make sure you have a part about your teaching. So the NSF program, they are actually program managers. They are actually looking at your report about your education. If you haven't done anything in teaching, this will going to reflect back to your future proposals. I actually put their names in there. I think this makes your proposal feels more personal and concrete. I don't know what.
If you put the name in there, do you need to provide a letter?
I didn't do that. Okay, just put a name there.
The second question, well, the question is somewhat related. So, I guess it's not clear to me. Probably many people have students from other countries that they pay for it. Is that part of your outreach, or is that completely separate? Like, for example, people probably have, people from Brazil or other countries that the government pays for students from. Is that considered part of your outreach, or you should do it aside of your application?
So you're saying that these are students that, you have students that come over that you pay,
No, I don't
or
think they pay, but
the other institution pays so that they can come here and work with you?
yeah, the first one is
Like
we
business
help
students?
and 1 or 2 undergrads every summer.
Like
and the second
business
one is
students?
Brazil.
Like visiting students? So would they be considered part of your education, that you're educating them? Is that what you're saying?
Or the outreach part.
Or is that part of your outreach? If
So
you're-
you want to know if you can count them if you don't pay for it, basically, right?
No, in the definition of outreach, it's considered only, in your institution or in your community, or also in other countries or other states.
So how far does outreach, what are they looking for?
So if you go visit, if you're there instead of mentoring them here, that's the question.
I think they're coming here.
So I think there's a broader impact to the United States or to the world, or is that what you're sort of driving at? Which is the National Science Foundation scientific development of the country of Brazil.
So it sounds like what you're describing is part of your broader impacts, right? I mean, this is not probably something you want to spend a lot of your proposal describing. I think you want to say, that you have been active in this area by mentoring students X and Y, right? With whatever background you can give in a short amount, and say you intend to continue that in the foreseeable future. That's not part of your education, right? Unless you have an idea to incorporate those students into your education proposal, right? You might be able to find a very clever way to sort of parlay that into a nice educational component. But I'd say what you've described so far is just, it's your broader impacts at the moment, part of your broader impacts. I guess one other comment is that, I think you can put in a name of a person, and that's that. At least I did that. I don't know if things have changed. But I think it used to be that if you were going to budget part of that grant for a specific person, then there might have been some other maybe paperwork that you needed to take care of. But if you're not budgeting for them, I think you can put their name and say that I've mentored them. If that answers your question.
We can probably take just a couple more questions. Yes.
So how many years did you remember before you decided to start applying for these programs? Was it the first year or did you wait a little bit longer?
How soon? Was it your first year or second year that you applied, that you were here?
Second or third, I can't remember.
Anyone else?
I think it's about the same, second or third.
Second.
They're evaluating on the body of work, so later helps. So you want to make sure that you have 3 chances before, so you don't want to wait too long.
So just keep them.
Discouraged first year, so say you've done a postdoc, maybe someone really experienced, would you discourage first year and professors from applying, and you can wait a little bit longer?
Do you have results from FSU? I guess I would evaluate the results and then decide, right? I mean, I would want to leave open a fair number of opportunity, but I would also want to show that you really have something going here. I think what you did is, we all did postdocs. I think it doesn't count, basically. Yeah.
Well, in social sciences, it's not as much, but yeah.
So you have this window, you have 3 years you can apply. Once you you hit your tenure place, you can't. As Jonathan, he needed 4 years.
I barely made it.
So keep that in mind. It's a balance between having enough, of your research under your belt to be able to put something forward, but not waiting so long that you're hurting yourself.
You
Okay.
can write a much stronger proposal in unless you're doing something wrong.
Other questions? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I want to say something about this. So I submitted my proposal on the second year also. I think generally speaking, if you haven't done any like a postdoc or anything after your graduation, I think it's a bad idea to submit it in the first year. So this is actually related to the topic of changing research area. Usually, when you're being independent research, you are supposed to do something different from your advisor, right? So from my personal opinion, I think you shouldn't do this in the first 2 or 3 years, because when you submit a proposal, they want to see if you have a credibility, if you can finish this job, right? So it's better to wait a year to get some preliminary result, then submit your proposal. Your proposal will be much stronger. You also have the first year, you can try maybe CRI or a regular small proposal. So this will increase your experience.
So a comment that I would add to that just goes back to reiterate something that was said before, is that you may have results, but what's equally as important is that you've gone out to some conference and presented those results and met some people who are going to be your reviewers, right? So I think if you have results but haven't met the potential reviewers and let those reviewers attach those results being here at FSU, then maybe it makes sense to wait until you've gotten out and met some people and they know that it's an FSU result. So.
Okay. Last question? Anyone? So.
I already asked one.
Okay.
You need to publish that preliminary results.
Do preliminary results need to be published before?
This might be discipline specific, but I would say at least in chemistry, your likelihood of getting funded goes up a lot if you've published. Basically, I think you want the panelists to sit around and say, I know this person, I read this paper, I saw them at a conference, it's really good, I like the trajectory that they're taking. Yeah.
So in my proposal, I had some preliminary results from my proposal that weren't published yet, but I'd published lots of related things. So I had a body of work out there that people could know about, but the actual previous work, big chunk of it hadn't yet been published. That's okay, it got published later, but there was enough out there already that it wasn't a big deal.
I actually want to add one thing to that. So your CV is very important, okay? So a professor in my department, he had been to one Korea panel. So they are going to look at your CV. So put your best work in your CV, okay? So I actually get one sentence in my proposal summary that says this guy has lots of publications in the top conference. So try to make sure your CV will reflect your best work. So this is very important.
Okay. Any other burning questions you feel? Oh, we still have like 5 minutes.
No, I feel, but I guess since a couple of the panelists mentioned that you've also gotten other early career awards, I've received another one in from another agency, and I'm trying to figure out how to distinguish, to what extent should you distinguish your research? Obviously, there's a certain amount of research ideas that could build off that current award that could either go to the application of that award in the future or go towards the NSF. And I'm wondering how much distance you feel is appropriate.
So how much distance between a different type of career award and this career award would you need?
Yeah, so the question is if you're going for a second and third career award, right? I haven't been on a career panel, but on a general panel, all I see is the title and the budget for current attending. So number one, make sure the title's different. The program managers, they all sit in Arlington, so they can go talk to each other and find out what their proposal's about. So you do want to think carefully about how to make your
are you saying in general or with career, is it advantageous to put an REU in at the same time?
So, question on whether putting the REU.
Go ahead.
So, I think we're getting down to the nitpicky thing now, so I wouldn't be too concerned about that. I know you can apply for supplemental. I haven't ever seen it live to it. So, I don't know, it may seem innocuous if you kind of see that. I don't know, but I usually see it after the fact.
Yeah, the program officer has a separate pot of REU money that he sits on. And in my experience, in my own proposal, if I ask for money for undergraduates, they cut the money. And then the program officer would say, oh, just come back to me and I'll give you some of my REU money. Because the more money that they save from cutting from your grant is more money that they can, it adds up to be able to fund an extra proposal.
I know in the proposals that we read last year, I didn't see any that were putting that request in. So, yes.
So I have seen people do the REU as supplemental
After.
I would do those, I think what Ross is suggesting, rather than try to start a new REU type of thing, if you have an undergraduate that you want to work with, write that into your education department, and budget for that person. And know that before your proposal gets awarded, they're going to take some of the way in the budget. So you may as well put that in there and let it be something that doesn't need to be funded. It probably makes more sense, I think, to just have that as a budget line item.
Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming today and being on our panel. I appreciate your assistance today. For those of you that are in social sciences that are wondering why there's no social scientists up here, I apologize. There were none available for today. Everybody had prior commitments, but you guys did a great job, so thank you for coming. We're going to have Mike Mitchell come up next and talk a little bit about